Immediately establishing central control, this move unlocks diagonal lines for development. Preparing for a solid French defense, e6 immediately challenges white's central pawn and hints at a robust pawn chain structure to come. Securing the center's dominion and asserting immediate dominion over key central squares. Opening the f-file so aggressively often invites sharp counterplay, potentially exposing your king prematurely. Fortifying the kingside for a potential fianchetto, this move aims to counter black's aggressive pawn push while preparing for a long-term queenside initiative. Developing the knight here immediately contests the center and prepares for potential kingside castling, a sensible step in this unusual opening. Positioning the bishop to eye the long diagonal offers excellent long-term pressure against black's kingside structure. Developing the bishop to its most active square prepares castling and supports the central pawn structure. Developing the knight clears the path for castling, a crucial step in solidifying king safety and preparing for central engagement. Solidifying the pawn chain, d6 prepares development and offers flexibility for the light-squared bishop. Fortifying the monarch's sanctuary is a prudent step, establishing a secure haven before venturing further into the center's fray. Solidifying the king's security with castling is a fundamental priority, preparing to join the queenside pawn storm. Fortifying the queenside pawn structure subtly prepares for potential pawn advances and aims to control central squares from the flank. A surprising redeployment, preparing potential queenside expansion or supporting a pawn break later. Securing the queen on a central diagonal aims to support pawn advances while eyeing potential queenside expansion. Exposing the king so early on the h-file might be a bold statement, but it also creates immediate targets. Developing a knight to its natural outpost, this squares off nicely, preparing further queenside expansion and bolstering the central pawn chain. Developing the knight to its natural square shores up the d4 pawn and prepares for potential queenside expansion. Unleashing the bishop's diagonal, this initiative aims to disrupt black's queenside harmony and initiate a potent central pressure, potentially opening lines towards the uncastled monarch. Developing the bishop to d7 facilitates king safety and supports a potential pawn push on the queenside. Crushing the center, this pawn thrust aggressively challenges black's queenside development and seeks to restrict the bishop on d7. Seeking to reroute the knight to a more active square, potentially preparing a kingside defense or counterattack. Unleashing a knight to the advanced outpost creates immediate discomfort for black's kingside pawn structure. Embracing the tactical crossroads, black shatters white's central pawn wall, opening lines for a daring counterinitiative. Exchanging the bishop clarifies the queenside pawn structure, opening lines for your knight. Reactivating the rook feels passive. It should be supporting an attack or defending weak squares instead of just finding shelter. Reclaiming the outpost, white reestablishes pressure on the light squares, a quiet but strategic repositioning of forces. Exposing your king's shadow on the kingside, you've surrendered central space for a precarious pawn chain. Unleashing a knight to a powerful central outpost, white immediately challenges black's exposed king and aims to seize the initiative. Challenging the center with this pawn thrust throws a wrench in white's development, but it might expose your king's safety. Reclaiming the central files with rook activity solidifies white's control and prepares for further penetration. Confronting the central knight, black forfeits pawn structure for a chance to simplify, albeit opening lines for white's rooks. Regaining the bishop reclaims central space and prepares pressure down the newly opened d-file, forcing black to defend passively. Challenging the bishop and preparing to contest the open d-file, this move signals a fight for initiative amidst the growing material imbalance. Unlocking the queen's diagonal opens up attacking possibilities on the kingside for white. Unraveling the pawn chain, black aims to simplify and exploit the open files now emerging. Reclaiming the queen from its active square allows for the immediate pressure on black's potentially exposed king. Reclaiming the central file opens up possibilities for knights, but risks leaving the king exposed. Unlocking the c5 square to pressure black's isolated pawns and control the central diagonal. Relocating the rook to the central file aims to contest control, though it might expose it to future attacks. Expanding queenside space to threat a queenside pawn storm and potentially restrict black's maneuvering. Black bravely challenges the central pawn structure, aiming to disrupt white's spatial advantage. Disrupting black's queenside pawns creates immediate spatial pressure and opens new avenues for white's attack. Liberating the pawn structure opens new avenues, but creates a permanent weakness on c6. Opening the c-file allows your rooks to dominate, creating immediate pressure on black's queenside. Reclaiming the initiative with a knight's maneuver, aiming to disrupt white's queen's pawn structure and open avenues for counterplay. Reclaiming the open file with the queen opens lines for attack and potentially simplifies the position. This maneuver secures the rook on a fresh, open file, ready to challenge white's pawn chain and potentially exploit the queenside. Unleashing a powerful rook that now commands the 7th rank, creating immense pressure on black's uncastled king. Retreating the queen to g6 avoids immediate material loss and seeks to regroup, but it allows white to consolidate their dominant rook. Clearing the queenside bottleneck with this queen repositioning initiates a dynamic battle for central squares and potential breakthroughs. Preventing the devastating knight outpost on g5 while sidestepping any immediate queenside pawn incursions. Seizing the open file now offers a decisive attack against black's king. Clearing the way for the rook to pressure white's queenside pawns adds immediate dynamism to black's position. Clearing the b-file suddenly opens up a potent diagonal, pressuring black's kingside and potentially creating discovered attacks. Unleashing pressure along the open b-file, this pawn advances, aiming to disrupt white's queenside structure and initiate counterplay. Asserting pressure on the open file, this pawn sacrifice aims to disrupt black's structure and open lines for attack. Opening the queenside pawns invites potential tactical skirmishes along the new diagonals. Unlocking the queenside pawn majority, this advance forces a critical decision on black's rook. Embracing the open files now, black aims to reactivate the queen and pressure the isolated pawn. The queen trade simplifies into a favorable rook and pawn endgame for white, leveraging the open files. A quiet consolidation, solidifying the pawn structure and preparing for the eventual endgame. Establishing control of the open file immediately sets the stage for a potential breakthrough. Embracing the rook on the 7th rank presents an immediate threat, forcing white to react to black's initiative. Seizing the open file, this rook activation aims to dismantle black's pawn structure and create attacking chances. Securing the king marks the transition into a simplified endgame, where piece activity will now dictate the advantage. The pawn march onward, threatening to sever black's defensive structure and march to promotion. A precarious pawn push, hoping to ensnare the rook, but it only liberates the black king. Opening the kingside to hunt pawns now that the opponent's king is exposed. Unleashing the pawn chain's power, this capture opens crucial diagonals, a bold gambit to disrupt the opponent's queenless structure. Securing the monarch's safety now becomes paramount, anticipating potential counterplay on the open files. Aimed at consolidating the king's position, this maneuver seeks to centralize and prepare for potential pawn pushes. Shifting the king towards the queenside pawns offers better support and potential for activity. Unleashing pawn potential on the kingside to ignite counterplay, hoping to disrupt the opponent's solidified structure. The king ventures out, seeking active participation in the unfolding endgame skirmishes.